Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 105 of Storyteller Conclave, a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game you can, whether you're a new story or a dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level. I'm Rob, and Sarah's not here, unfortunately. But I have a co-host that we were able to squeeze in, a good friend of mine, Kathrine Moore. Say hello, Kathrine.
Well, hello, everyone.
Sarah will be back next week. She is chugging down potions, asking for divine intervention, and doing all the things necessary to stay healthy. And as a side note, it's not COVID. So, but we are going to send prayers and rituals and help her as we can. Now, Kathrine stepped up and co-hosting. This is not an interview by any means, but is kind of apropos because I was trying to find somebody out of our connection of friends who had experience doing improv and theater and a history with that, and Kathrine came to mind as one of the very first people I could think of because I have a history with seeing you do crazy improv. So
it's called daily life.
Yeah, but you've got about 25 years
Yes.
of this behind you now?
Yes, over 25 years.
Where did you start with this? We'll get a little bit about you before we get into this.
Absolutely. Well, I started, like we were talking about earlier, actually, I started role-playing at a very young age. I was not even a teenager when the whole D&D thing first really got rolling. So that was the start of it. And then in high school, it was a case of, how can I be anybody else other than who I am?
Aha!
So that was role-playing there, and then into theater, and then into studies in theater, and then
So
into
you went
improv.
role-playing before theater versus
Yeah.
theater, then role-playing.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Okay, all
Which
right.
I'm not sure we established the other night with Sarah.
And you've done both some structured and unstructured theater
Absolutely.
work as well.
Yes.
So, because
Yes.
I and I'm going to say it as we're going through stuff, as we were kind of talking about things, but I really don't see it so much as acting as improv, and really that's all role-playing is.
Yes.
So.
Yes. And role-playing is the ultimate freedom. It is absolutely, it should be fun. It should be amazing. Whereas acting can be fun, but acting can also be terrifying, and acting can feel further from yourself. You know, I've got to play this character, and this character has this motivation, and maybe that's too far from who you are, and that can make you struggle a little.
Exactly. Now, can you remember a role that you played, either acting or improv, that was like one of your most creative moments?
One of my most creative moments was having on stage, we had somebody get sick just before we went on. So I played a double role.
Oh, Lord.
On stage. And I would run from one end of the stage to the other, changing my voice and doing the lines for the other person.
That is fantastic. And kind of rolling right into this, were you nervous ever? Like, was it early on? Did you get more comfortable with it? Or are you always nervous when you're doing things like that?
I think you're always a little bit nervous, but the nervous is different. There's the nervous, what if I screw up? Mm-hmm. And there's the nervous of, I'm just really excited about this, which can come out as nerves.
Oh, 100%. So the reason why I kind of asked Kathrine, because you obviously have some experience in this, and funny enough, we've only LARPed together. We've actually never tabletop together.
No, we haven't, have we?
That is funny. We've talked about all the games that we like together, but we've never tabletopped.
Yeah.
We're going to get that changed. Because it's funny. I was going back through all my notes, and I realized that I actually had full write-ups ready to go for a 7th Sea game with you and Mark and a few other people, and things came in between. I'm like, oh man, I
loves me some 7th Sea.
So yeah, we'll get back to that. Yeah, we both have a love for it. Ha ha ha. So and thank you everyone in live chat for supporting us, and I see Sarah's out there. Thank you, Sarah, for for bringing your voice into the conversation, although hoarse in the normal way. You are glorious in the live chat.
Thank you, Sarah. We love you.
Yes. So please get lots of fluids and feel better. I will see you soon. But this week we are talking about role-playing 101. Not storytelling 101, but role-playing, which has a major aspect of that, and getting into character. And there were a lot of really good discussions that happened on the Discord about this. There were people talking about aspects of getting into character, whether or not you're playing yourself, whether or not you're playing someone else completely different, and how to get into that. And one of the things that I really want to kind of start with here, that came into discussions that we were having last night, even as we were preparing for the show sheet and making sure we had everything together, was that role-playing is different than tabletop gaming. And when D&D first started, it was very technical. It was
a Monopoly game.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about.
You were playing to win. The DM was throwing things at you, he was trying to kill you, and you were trying to win. And we've evolved from that. Role-playing is a step away from that. You are no longer winning. Failure makes things interesting. People talk about, total party wipes, and the game continues.
Yes.
Or players wiping and just grabbing a new character sheet and rolling on. And that is the difference. Like in Monopoly, when you're out of money, you're bankrupt and done, right? It's over. Game's over, right? Depending on what rule sets and things you're doing with it. But, I mean, that's the whole thing, is that your fun is done. You're now watching. Whereas with tabletop role-playing, that's not the case at all.
Absolutely. You can like you said, you can roll up a new character. You can roll up something very similar to what you had if it fits the party. Or you can take what you learned from the party that ended you and say, oh, okay, what this adventure needs or what this party needs is, well, we don't need 3 rogues. We need 2 rogues and a paladin.
Yeah, I mean, fitting the role that you could be into. And so in that sense, you're never moving toward a win. You're working at a collaborative story. And part of that is the yes and architecture of things. It's more than just you having fun at the table. It's a group of people having fun at the table. So when we're talking about role-playing, we're stepping away from that. If you're finding yourself stepping back to, I want to win, I'm rule stacking my character to win, I don't care so much about, playing a role, I just want to win this game, maybe you're not looking at role-playing the same way. And we may not be speaking to you in that way. But we'd like to encourage you. And so we're talking about defining characters. We're talking about moving beyond their stats.
Yes.
Beyond, that one, because I remember back in early D&D doing here's your 4 6-sided dice, roll them for your stats, and you could have terrible stats.
You could. You absolutely. And at that point, you'd spent 2 hours rolling, so you just re-rolled a new character because you learned that a certain stat you were just not going to survive it. But again, that's the winning. That's the competitive aspect of it. Whereas now, you've got a 1 in charisma. Okay, that's just going to be fun to play.
Yeah. And you figure out that little bit and what changes about your character. And I've seen people go both directions, where they'll build a whole background and a whole design for a character and then create the actual numbers on a page. I've had people who will, if they're doing D&D, roll their stats and then go, what does this look like to me? And then just step off from that and move in a direction.
Well, as we mentioned last night, too, or a couple times along the way, we've seen people come to a table with a 30-page single-spaced typed background for a character. And that's great if that's what you want to do. But I've also seen it, like we said, you get the equivalent of a 3x5 card with "you are this character," and it's got 3 words to describe them, and you run from there. So it's, there is a huge range of starting points.
Well, yeah, and not only that, with different systems, you run a lot of different things. I know with if I'm not mistaken, you've done Vampire LARP before.
Oh, yeah.
And some of the pre-generated LARPs at some of the conventions where they hand you a sheet.
Yes.
Like, you're given effectively a character sheet with a few motivations, but it has no movements behind the character other than they're looking to do this one thing. They don't tell you how. They don't necessarily give you if they're doing it angrily or if they're doing it with love or passion, because you don't necessarily know what's on the receiving end of that on the other side. So you always want to be able to be prepared to do that. So it's not always just about the numbers that are handed to you. It's expressing your character through your personal words and actions. And that's the kind of thing that you want to do when you step away from yourself. And you're going to always carry something with you. I mean, actors do it all the time.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, there are some actors who literally, you look at them, the roles they're in, and they're like, that's that actor. That's that style you expect to see.
Yes.
One of the ones that comes to my mind is Sean Connery. Sean Connery is always Sean Connery. I don't care if he's, James Bond
An
or
ancient Spaniard.
exactly, or an ancient Spaniard, But he's always going to be Sean Connery. You know what to expect. I think for a long period of time, there were a lot of casting directors who would grab Jim Carrey and put him in a specific role in a specific way. I am very happy that he's gotten to do other roles.
Yes.
And I think that's also surprising to people at tables when the same thing happens. Someone always plays the strong, dumb fighter, who's just out there to beat something down. And then, one day you guys shift systems and suddenly he's this very eloquent
Machiavellian
aristocrat out of nowhere. And that's a beauty. That's a thing to being able to step. But it is not you. It is an idealized version of you, maybe. In improv, you're often given a motivation or a direction.
Yes.
But other than that, it's just it's an idealized or a step away from yourself.
Sure. And the improv and role-playing go in with each other because you're never, I'm sure you can improv against the mirror, but you're not going to have a whole lot of fun with it. There's something in improv called yes and it's sounds very technical, but all it is yes and how do I introduce this character into the situation? Mm-hmm. Yes and where do we go from here? And there's a lot of give and take, and that's one of the great things about role playing is you can go with that. You can sort of figure it out and let the other characters in the group or even your friends, help you along the way. If you're super confident, great. But if you're stumbling a little, this is the perfect place to sort of dip your toes in.
Exactly. I mean, and it's not without its, issues. It's not without its concerns and feelings like that. I mean, the whole idea of not even knowing where to start. I mean, I've watched people literally come to games, for their, Sub-Zero session before, like, even any gameplay starts where we're making characters sitting around and everybody's working on their things and they've got ideas and they're, maybe I'll make a mage or a ranger. I don't know. What are you doing? And then there's that one or two people who are sitting in the room going, I don't have a clue. Yeah. I don't know anything.
Yeah.
And you feel for them a little bit, and you throw some ideas, but nothing's sticking, And it's that whole creative process sometimes just gets instantly blocked.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's overwhelming. I mean, think about it. Just the D&D system alone. How many books? If you were to make a library of what's available for a D&D character, a physical library,
mm-hmm.
you'd have hundreds of books. Where do you even start with that?
Yeah.
That's massively overwhelming. Mm-hmm. So start small.
Yeah.
Start very small. We talked the other day about, I have a favorite character from a book I read when I was 10. Great. Go with it. Or you see a piece of art. I know a lot of people that see artwork, whether it's on Deviant or,
mm-hmm.
they go, or Insta. They just see an image and they say, I like that. I want to know more about that character. I will become that character to find out their story.
I think that's a great place to start because I love, as much as when I was younger and you'd come to a table maybe after a new book came out or after a movie came out and someone would be like, yeah, I'm thinking about playing a dark elf ranger and he wields dual scimitars and but he's a good guy. He's just a little different and his name is Fizzit Murderin'. That's it. And you're like, yeah, we know exactly who you are. But at the same time, you know what to expect. They know how to be that character because they're mimicking the book.
Yes. I'm Celrond, and this is my companion, Sunshine.
Exactly. I mean, I remember doing that. I remember grabbing characters. I mean, one of my first things that I played was Robotech.
Yeah,
it was directly out of an anime. You had anime characters right there. It was not hard to see who these people were and how to mimic them, and it gave you a basis. And I think that was great for other stories. I think, and I have to bring around one of the things in our podcast, unfortunately, the term turtles comes around a lot because there's a love for turtles.
Okay.
And I think...
Sarah and turtles?
Yeah, to go figure. But TMNT... the whole role-playing of that system on that piggybacked not only the comics, but also a TV series.
Yes.
Very visual, very easy to pick up on who you could be, and you could just mimic.
Yes.
100%.
And as a starting point, if you take a sort of a stock character or a known character, sometimes that's easy because it allows you to know exactly what it is, and you can move the story along. And then suddenly you'll realize, with a great game, 6 sessions in, you're moving away from where the character started, and that's a good thing. You're sort of inhabiting it, or on the flip side of that, sometimes it's a good guidance. Oh my gosh, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles would never ever eat ice cream before pizza. I'm not eating dessert first.
Exactly. I mean, it's a simple thing, but
it's very simple.
But it's a great way to become that character, to be able to pull them out. I mean, if you're literally love Frodo Baggins.
Yeah.
And you can attach to him, what his steps are going to be, and you literally pick him up and you drop him in Shadowrun.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Oh,
so
yeah.
now he's literally, Frodo Baggins is sitting in front of a Johnson having to get money because he's in a different world. There's nothing wrong with doing that.
Yeah.
You will eventually no longer be Frodo Baggins. It takes like 10 sessions at max, probably 3, because you will have done terrible things between session 0 and session 3, and now you're a different person, but you still know all those motivations.
Yes.
You're still working with those pieces. And I don't think you're moving too far away from yourself, and you don't have to necessarily come up with a backstory then.
Yeah, no. It's absolutely, it's a comfort level. But as we said, it can be scary. It can be intimidating to just to jump in, and sometimes it doesn't work, and so you re-roll a character. You know,
exactly.
I mean,
that's the beauty of being able to just grab another sheet of paper and write something new. One of the things that I read and I loved when I put it in, because I started writing about it and I didn't have a good way to describe it, was that if you've got a character, even if you're working on just a background and you're not too sure where to start from with that background, don't necessarily start with history. Don't necessarily start with, trying to write an epic novel. There's no reason why your character needs to have an adventure before their adventure.
Oh, exactly.
They could have been a farmer who just had one thing happen to them, or one thing that they love, and then that's the one thing. The City Slickers one thing. What is your
absolutely.
one thing? What is your drive? What is what gets you up in the morning?
Yeah.
What, when it's raining outside, what gets you on your horse and puts you riding away? What is that one thing?
The evolution for kindness to all mankind. Well, that's huge, but that's the one thing.
Yeah.
You like turtles. You want to get up every day because you want to make sure the water in the pond stays clean for the turtles. There you go.
Simple thing. And what's great about a one thing is it's something your storyteller can work from.
Yes.
It's something that everyone at the table can come back to.
And there's a yes and,
exactly.
for that example.
Exactly. And it's very easy for any of the other players to pick up and play with your one thing as well. Now, I'm going to flat out say later on, don't shit on somebody's one thing. But that's effectively what it comes down to is that you're really taking the time to wrap around that one thing. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. And I do think other players who may have developed their characters or have moved into a situation where they see somebody who's only doing a one thing, help them.
Sure.
Work with the one thing.
Change. Your one thing can absolutely change.
100%. I never think that somebody should have their one thing be a person or a single object or something, because they can always get stolen. But there's nothing wrong with Pee Wee Herman's bike. There was a whole movie.
There's an entire movie exactly.
That was about him trying to find his bike.
There was an entire shop on Mackinac Island devoted to Pee Wee's bike. So
there you go.
There you go.
So it can be one thing. Another thing about beyond your background and beyond necessarily your motivation is that aspect, that simplistic aspect of self. And some people think it's a voice, some people think it's a movement, maybe we address. All of that is part of it.
Oh, yeah.
But when you think of something iconic, sometimes it is the feel of the character. And you could still be yourself. You don't necessarily have to be a caricature, but you can be an aspect of yourself one step away.
Sure, absolutely.
Maybe you don't see yourself you see yourself as shy. Fine. Change up and be ego-driven.
Sure.
Be that person who is out there and brave and can do whatever. That is that you are now playing a character. You've now stepped outside of yourself.
Or if that feels big, even little things. You and Sarah and I were laughing, but a lot of things, drop your voice a little, raise your voice a little. Even just little things. Okay, this is not how I normally speak. Or wear a different pair of shoes. I loved that with Sarah. You and I were laughing about that.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't necessarily wear a costume to role play, but sometimes you might wear, like we were talking, if you're playing a very formal character, go throw on a necktie.
Yeah.
Watch how everything changes almost instantly.
Yeah, I actually knew somebody who would always wear a pair of shades
Okay.
coming to a game session. And they didn't wear sunglasses any other time, but they would always wear a pair of shades to their sessions because it got them into the cool of their character.
And it shifts, and it's nice because that's also your one thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got one thing, and the next thing you know,
yeah. I'll ask this question: what's Brad Pitt's one thing in every one of his movies?
Eating.
He's always
eating. Yes,
yes. It's something he brings into every movie that you can look for, and everyone looks for it.
Val Kilmer and prestidigitation.
All the time. Oh, so wonderful. Such a wonderful thing. I keep seeing it coming up more and more in movies, and I love it. I love that more actors are doing fun things.
That in. Yeah.
The whole Marvel thing they did between Ant-Man and WandaVision with the one agent.
Oh, and see, I haven't.
You haven't seen this?
I haven't.
Oh, it's the first episode, so it doesn't really.
Okay.
First major episode, but.
And I even know all the spoilers, but I haven't sat down and watched it yet.
Yeah, and I followed this. I thought it was good. I don't remember the agent's name.
Agent Wu.
Agent Wu.
Yes.
Learns the card trick.
Oh, the close-up magic.
Yes.
And the fact that they actually learned that for the movie. They didn't have stand-ins. I love that.
Yeah, both of them knew how to do it, and it was just funny. He was just like, teach me how to do that. And he learned. And you watched the evolution of it through the series, which is great.
There's another thing. You know, you can learn something outside of your role-playing and bring it into your role-playing. Oh, my character is really, really good at tying sailor's knots. So sit down when you're watching something. Try a sailor's knot or two.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's a one thing. It's a skill, but it gives you that sense of persona.
Yeah, it's funny that Overwatch was bringing up the singular point of emotional focus for a character. I love that. It's a great way to drive. You know, you look at someone from stories like Paul Muad'Dib.
Oh,
you know,
sure.
and what was his major drive? And you could pick any number of things.
Yes.
But that's the point, is you could pick one and drive with that. One of the things that he used to do, I believe still does, in his Shadowrun games, is he loves to tell characters to grab a skill that is not game-centric.
Okay,
you know, that
sure,
it's a knowledge-based skill, and you are great at whatever that thing is.
Yes.
And so, and that helps define your character. And I remember people were like, comics. I know specifically all of the original Superman artists, and I have digital recreations of all of the first 13 issues of Superman, and can tell you every scene and every panel, anything about
every
it.
Page.
Fantastic. That's great. That makes you that
great.
aficionado. You know, one of my character was a techno DJ.
Oh.
Like he could turntable like nobody's business. Like that was just something he did on the side.
Yeah.
And he knew that whole field. But it helped us round out our characters and give us conversation points as well.
And it gives the storyteller great jumping off points, you know, and little, almost in-game Easter eggs. You know, you walk into a club and the one character knows exactly which remix is playing.
Exactly.
Because of a skill set.
You know, and it's little things like that allow the world to feel living. And you add a part of living. Now, you move into games that are like City of Mist or Urban Shadows, which we've talked about on the show before. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them.
I was looking up Urban Shadows. That's funny, just today. Serendipity. But yeah,
it's a great game. But the opening of that, you build the city as a group. So there's a lot more collaborative stuff that goes into that. But it's very much the same, where not only are you building a character with the entire table, you're building the world around them and the environment and the history all together. And that, in those situations, it's very yes and.
Sure.
But it can be, a little daunting. But again, there's no reason why you can't do the same thing in those kind of situations and grab from books, grab from movies, and add them into your piece.
And with your one good thing, then you've got the one flaw.
And the flaw is important.
Flaw.
So one of the things that Sarah made sure that we put on the sheet, and I totally agree with it's Sarah's method of character, is that the character is an expert at one thing, but they have a fatal flaw.
Yes.
And that fatal flaw makes for interest. Whether they're a gladiator, unmatched in combat, but they have a crippling addition to magic potions. Like they'll just pop them off whenever they can, or they're an ice witch from the northern mountains who, is a master of Arctic winds, but for some reason just can't grasp the nuance of morality. There's just everything's kind of gray to them,
Sure.
Or they're a master thief and a rogue, but they can't shut up about doing it.
Exactly.
They have to tell somebody, and it's that failure that you're building into the character that makes them interesting, that makes the stories happen. You know,
yes.
no one character is an island of perfection. That's what a Mary Sue is.
Yes.
They're just
and they're boring.
Yeah, and completely and
just
utterly
dull.
boring. But the moment that your character has some flaw, some reason that they can't do something, and it cripples them in some way, now they're interesting. Now there's some struggle for them to deal with.
Yes.
That they can't quite get around.
And again, it can be huge or it can be little. That's totally within your comfort zone. And choose your own flaw. Or the other thing, it's collaborative.
Mm-hmm.
Ask people. Oh gosh, I've got this great idea for a character, I think, but I want something to go wrong with them. Mm-hmm. Well, what's it going to be? Well, you know, they're left-handed, and it's a world that doesn't understand making left-handed scissors. You know, I mean,
that's actually hilarious.
Off the top of your head, and you can say, "Great, that's a great idea," or "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I'm gonna keep looking."
Right, and sometimes the dumb things are the funniest parts. I mean, one of the things that just came to my mind is about the whole failure thing. In a simplistic term, if you can't wrap your head around it, when have you ever opened a jar and it opened fine, and there was something funny about that?
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's when you can't get the lid open and you're fighting at it for like 2.5 hours, and then someone just walks up, grabs the jar off the counter because your hand's hurt and you're shaking your wrist out, and they hand it back to you, and you're like, son of a bitch. And it's now a story. It's just changed. You know, and that's the thing, is that bit of personal conflict makes the difference.
Well, and that's the other thing to remember, is that there's the trope that best stories don't happen during the story. Best stories are happening when you talk about them afterwards. So you can't really force those moments, like the jar. Like, can't come up with a good example, but I love the jar analogy. You know, if you were to set out the jar for somebody to try and open, not so much fun. But if you come to it organically.
Exactly.
And Overwatch, I'm going to have to make a samurai armor apron now for cake decorating.
Ooh, I like this. So now let's step out of backgrounds a little bit, because I think we're starting to step in the next major bump, which is the aspect of the social part of it, the communicating with other people, looking silly doing it. Now, I think I'm happy to say that most of the D&D stigma that we had in the 70s and 80s
is gone.
I wouldn't say it's completely, but most of it is.
Most of it, yes.
Because, I mean, when you talk about somebody going to play D&D, that, you know, back basically when we were kids, it was, you were a nerd, you played in a closet,
you didn't admit it to anybody.
No, you hid your books, you know, you, in hush circles you'd talk with people like, hey, you wanna play D&D?
Yeah.
You know, kind of, it was a drug.
You never asked that openly.
No, that was never. Someone would come to you, you know, it'd be like, I heard you guys are running a game. Yeah, you want in? Okay.
I heard there might be this author named something like Tolkien.
Exactly. Or someone would hand you a book, you'd be like, yeah, I've already read that. Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
What's your favorite character? You know, and now you start into that. But now we have celebrities who play all the time.
Oh, yeah.
We have celebrity games produced. We have tons more people hawking it. It's in shows as major themes.
Sure.
I mean, I'm happy to see that.
Oh,
at the same time, now that we have all these people playing, I think we've hit the other end of that curve. Is that what group do you fit into? How do you now step into it? Am I not good enough to play?
Sure.
And I think that is a serious risk that comes up. But I like the concept of, and it's something I've always pushed, and I know it's true, the concept of the first follower. Is that if you step in, someone else will join you.
Yes.
I think that's a major thing that anything happens. If you see someone role-playing, join them.
Sure.
Lean into it.
Yep.
Be ridiculous.
And ridiculous doesn't always mean, you know, jumping around like Daffy Duck going woohoo woohoo. It can be something that you just, okay, I'm a slender, you know, I'm a 5'9", 120-pound person. I'm going to play the samurai, the sumo barbarian.
Right.
You know, that in its way is a little bit ridiculous.
Exactly.
So.
I love watching people come up with characters that are clearly not themselves.
Yes.
That are something different, so that they can get out of their lives. And I think right now, of all times, we need to step away.
Yes.
I mean, the last thing I really want to play is a post-apocalyptic past, just slightly after Contagion affects a major politically charged environment. This is not in my list.
A middle-aged wage slave is not in my character sheet at the moment.
So I'm going to say Paranoia is out right now.
Wow.
Like, if you can get through character creation, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, that's a podcast on its own.
It is. We're eventually going to get to Paranoia, but I don't know if we can complete a podcast with Paranoia without losing the game. So, but it is that step outside of yourself, and I think you do yourself a service by doing that because it gives you room to express with a group that you can be comfortable with. And I'm not saying that you have to start your role-playing off in a ridiculous way or find a group and then immediately ham yourself up to see if they're accepting of that.
Yeah.
But I do think that stepping in and into a group that, especially like a improv group, because everybody is expecting something. It's not like they're all sitting down, you're all sitting down playing a game of, Monopoly, and suddenly you have a Texan voice and want certain things, and they're like, why are you doing that?
And Knox, that's a brilliant point. That absolutely, most groups will absolutely say, yeah, come on in, sit down for a while, watch how it goes, and if you want to jump in, let us know.
Yeah, I mean, it's the girlfriend complex, I guess, or situation where it was always the dude is playing the game, but his girlfriend's sitting off to the side, and she's just like, hey, do you want to play? And I think I could play an elf, or I could play that. And that's saying, now I'm sad to say that I'm glad to say that's not the trope anymore. I hear more about there's a bunch of girls playing D&D, and the guy's like, dude, I want to play.
Yeah.
And I think that's great, but I do think that finding your level of commitment and expression within a group is important, and it will grow with trust.
Sure. And the other thing, we'd kind of talked about the fact that you may have the best friends on the planet, and you all get together and sit down to a D&D session, and you're at each other's throats within a half hour because you've got different goals, and you don't mesh as a role-playing group, and that's okay. There are people in my life I do not go play competitive sports with because I know somebody's going to end up injured by the end of it.
100% agree with you. I mean, I've definitely sat down at tables, and I brought it up last night, where I've played with somebody, and I'm like, I can't continue this.
Yeah, this is not going to be healthy.
This is going to be toxic
yes.
for even our acquaintanceship at this point. And I think you do learn a lot about people through role-playing and what they're willing to accept and how they react to things.
Lack of consequences.
Exactly. That is a huge part of it, is that because once you get to the comfortable point where you are able to express those aspects of yourself, it is the lack of consequences. It is the childhood lack. You go back to the simple moments in childhood when you're playing with Legos and fully imagining, and someone looks at you and says, no, you can't do that. That's not what it works like in this world. And you're like, how are you telling me how to make believe? And that's the simple fact of it, is that grows with role-playing as a whole.
Sure.
Is that you're going to run into those kind of blockades, and sometimes they're acceptable because maybe that person just either has a certain framework that they're working within, or it's somebody you don't want to play with because they're framing things in a way you don't feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're not up for murder hoboing, your way through a dungeon or a town, and the whole group is already doing that, and you're like, this isn't my clique, guys, sorry.
Yeah.
That's okay. There are other groups. There are literally services that will find you groups to play with.
Yes.
Online, and hopefully very soon back in person.
But it goes back to your point of, don't piss in their Cheerios. Maybe somebody's got something a little bit strange, but if they're enjoying it, don't ruin it for them.
No.
I mean, if it's something that seems ridiculous to you, or if it's a minor thing, let the minor things go.
Yeah.
If they're introducing a spaceship in the middle of a fantasy world, okay, that's probably a moment of, hey, can we have a sidebar with the DM?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a little out there, but my character loves juggling on horseback. Okay, that's weird, but it's not going to break anything, I don't think.
Exactly. It's the understanding the simple limits of trying not to break from the mind's eye theater. Don't immediately just start throwing in, a whole bunch of, current nomenclature and memes.
Oh, sure.
Try and fit it in a little bit so that, you're actually being someone in the story. Now, I take that back. If you're playing a cyberpunk game, your character is a, special, knowledge base is, 2,000 memes and cat gifs, and that's what they're great at. You know what? Lean into that then. Totally different story. Please ignore me. But, if you're in a fantasy area, I think that could be a little different. But I think this really leans into like the things you can do. And I think one of the things you had brought up earlier is that even if you're not comfortable with necessarily stepping away from yourself into a new character and you're not confident about how to be confident, maybe you are a shy person, maybe you're not certain that you could move into that, try something simple like just changing your posture.
Yes.
Physically move your body so that your chest is out and your shoulders are back and you're sitting upright. You will have a different voice.
Yes.
You will have a different stance. Those simple things, or, conversely, if you tend to always be someone who is stepping forward and being a leader, maybe you tend to drive things because you just want things to get done and get over with, and you don't want, it's exhausting for you, and you don't want to do that in your stories as a character. Maybe play someone who's meek and concerned. Hunch over a little bit, whisper your stuff a little bit more, stutter when you're trying to get an idea across so that, it becomes a challenge. These are simple little things you can do just to alter yourself from what you're comfortable with to becoming something. And if you, like you were saying, if you want to, wear a tie.
Yeah.
Put on some glasses. Grab cut a straw down so you have like a fake cigarette in your hand, while you're sitting at the table and you gesture with it.
The animated scene in Mulan where she's practicing being a guy. Hi, I am very manly. I have a sword. I see you have a sword too,
Ha ha ha. And those simple things, changing your diction, changing your pacing on the way you say things.
Either speed it up really, really quickly if you tend to be a slow talker, or slow it way down.
Yeah. Think about each word as it comes out. Consider your next phrase. Sometimes, like Skyrim and ESO love to do, someone asks you a question, just give a menacing look of silence back at them for a second. And when the GM's just like, are you not answering? I'm giving them a menacing look like this. Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Menace away.
That is menacing. Okay, got it. Okay, that's your answer. But try to find yourself something one step, a simple thing.
And since we're talking mainly tabletop, and I mean there are so many platforms these days.
Oh,
but,
God, yes.
But if we're starting back with a basic, I've got my character sheet, I've got my dice, you can also let the dice help you inform that. Mm-hmm. Do a roll. Roll for, I'm a very meek person in life. Roll for an initiative. You hit that 20, go running through those gates. Yeah. There's your character, and that's an easy way again to get it, to have it informed, is let the rules of the game help you with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you have a great moment, lean into the great moment. If you 3 games in start to find a passion within the game itself, maybe there's an orphanage, and you keep going back to it because something about it sparks within you personally, and now that orphanage is starting to have troubles. And you're going to make it a point to keep bringing the group back to take care of that orphanage. The storyteller's going to see that.
Yes.
They're either going to lean into it a little bit, or you're going to have to look at them and say, hey, this is something that's kind of cool for me.
Yeah.
And now you have either a failure point that you can lean into, or a bind point, which is great, where the story can grind against you a little bit, and that's always great. Those kind of obstacles are fantastic. But it gives you that point of failure to work with.
Yes.
And to be able to do things. Now, I know one of the things that you had to do a lot of in doing improv is voices. And we were kind of talking about some of the things you can do when you're attempting to do a voice.
Yes.
I think one of the things that always got me about voices, and it's not so much about the accent, and it's not so much about the feeling, but the tone, often comes from a little acting trick that was, which I remembered, which was before you always think about what happened 30 seconds before the scene.
Yes.
So they're saying, okay, you're all at a bus stop. So the first thing I don't think about is what I'm doing actively. I think about the 30 seconds.
Where was I half a block away?
Right.
Or where was I already on the bus bench?
Exactly. So if you can try and come up with an idea of where you've been, even if it was just moments earlier, were you eating? So you're brushing crumbs off of yourself and licking your fingertips because the barbecue was so good. That's a great little thing that helps inform you of what your next motivations and feelings are going to, or where your brain is going in the next 30 seconds.
Yes.
Like, yes, you're in a scene with the rest of the players, but maybe your mind's on that hoagie that you left downstairs, or you saw
the cat ate.
Or that the guard had as you passed, through the security gates and knocked everybody out. You're like, man, he did have that hoagie. He's not going to eat that while he's unconscious, guys. And, meanwhile, they're trying to break in, and you're like, I'm right back at
Can I point out for the record that the Hufflepuff, for once, is not the one that brought up the food?
I'm eating right now. I'm eating right now.
We have witnesses. There are listeners out there.
Tis true. But that can add a lot to the feeling of your character.
Yes.
And I know people have a hard time with accents. We've talked about, drawing things out and making it easier in that sense.
Well, the other thing we talked about is a lot of the time, especially in a high fantasy game, whether it's a Skyrim or a fantasy-based D&D, there's this impulse to switch up your language completely.
Mm-hmm.
And that can really trip you up. There are people that can do it there, and there are people, especially if you come from an academic background, you're throwing in, $6 words and things with 22 different syllables. But if that's not how you speak normally, oh, my lord, I seeth that you are going somewhere. And it just, you start tripping over yourself.
It's the Shrek, yes. No, you won't.
Yes.
And I think it can be funny.
Yes, but if that's not what you're going for, if you're doing it for the humor, fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're doing it because you want to convey something about a character, just be warned. It might go off brilliantly, but it might fall flat.
Yeah.
And it's okay to fail. It's okay to go, oh gosh, that was terrible. I'm not ever going to do that again.
Yep. I'm just trying to catch up with the
feed.
The feed is going great.
I know.
I'm loving tonight's conversations and everybody going back and forth. But also there are some settings. The one that comes to mind immediately is Shadowrun, that literally in the back of the book is nomenclature of the space.
Yes.
Like, you don't say it's a 7-Eleven or a convenience store. It's the Stuffer Shack.
Yes.
It's, the stuff isn't terrible. It's Drek.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's absolute flavor text. That's wonderful.
And you'll hear it and everybody can be involved.
Yes.
So then it's not just one person doing
yes.
it. It's everyone throwing in a word or two there. A lot of great shows will do this.
Frel.
Yes, exactly.
Firefly
was notorious
yes.
for it.
Yes.
Actually talked with a guy or chatted with a guy on Reddit whose group loved playing Firefly in Powered by the Apocalypse engine instead, because they didn't like the original thing
sisters.
With the Firefly.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible. We discussed this.
Yeah, it's not the greatest, but they would play it with that and one of the prerequisites that the storyteller had was everyone needed to know either Japanese or Mandarin to play.
Oh, wow.
They had to know some, and throw it. If you wanted to swear, you had to swear in a full sentence.
Okay.
In either Chinese or Mandarin.
Nice.
And he said it was the funnest game that he had ever played, because some of these people had 1 year of Japanese or 1 year of Mandarin, or people were learning Mandarin very quickly so that they could figure out how to swear in it because they didn't know informal.
Yes.
But there was one kid in their group who grew up in a Japanese home. Like his parent, he was adopted, actually. He was American, he was adopted, which is interesting. And he spoke Japanese fluently, and just listening to
Just-
not only the horrific, but the terrible things people would drop just because they wanted to get in on those moments. And he's like, this is hilarious and terrifying. If my mother was here, we'd all have soap.
Yes.
There would be soap around
Twisted
all
ears
the way
and
around.
soap in the mouth.
But it added fun to the game,
Yes.
and everyone was effectively just playing themselves.
Yes.
But that one aspect that was thrown in there was kind of pushed.
Well, and you talk about the sort of terrible or the swearing, which is, it brings up that point of comfort levels, and that's an important thing too, because as we mentioned, this is a world without consequences. So you will have people that show up, and you realize that they might not be a very nice person, and it's we especially in this day and age. I mean, a tabletop table should be the ultimate safe space. So there should be built in from players, from storytellers, a way to keep the players safe. And we've talked about the X card.
Yes.
I love the X card.
X cards are a great way to do that. I think that knowing by expression or being able to simply say, I think that's too far.
Yes.
To another player and or to the storyteller, or using the X card if you feel that it's necessary. I think those are all huge pieces. Again, don't take a dump on somebody else's one thing.
Well, we talk
either.
about going to extremes, and sometimes people do some sort of horrific character just to try and shake things up, and they cross a line for somebody at the table.
Yep.
And a lot of the times it's not intentional.
Yep.
But it's so important to have that built in that you can say, oh, we need to dial it back a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I can honestly say one of the characters that I've always wanted to try, but will probably never able to bring to a character, is an evangelical character. Someone who is just ridiculously fervent in some belief. It doesn't even have to be a religious belief. Yeah. I just want them to think everyone else is going to damnation unless they hug teddy bears. Something like that. And it's a hard thing to bring up. It pushes a lot of buttons, and so I'm probably never going to be able to play this right.
I was in a game with somebody who was a dwarven cleric, and he played it brilliantly, and but there was a comfort level at the table, and that was something that a very experienced role player took on. And again, I mean, maybe he could have done it right out the gate, having never rolled a character before, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah.
If you're just starting out, go ahead and start small. I mean, if you want, you can go as big as you want, obviously, but you don't have to.
Definitely not. And I mean, the other thing I would say, and it definitely came up in our conversation, was the being a jerk and using the term, it's what my character would do.
Oh, yes. There you go.
And somehow that's okay. It's not. If someone has a problem with something, work with it and say, okay, that's too far, take it back. But if you're somebody who's going to use their character as a defensive way to do whatever you want, you're not playing with a group at that point. I'm
gonna pull all the bunny's ears. I'm gonna yank the bunny's ears because that's what my character would do.
Right,
dude, that's mean. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Well, no, I am compelled because I have a terrible character to show you I have a terrible character, and every time we come across a bunny, I'm going to pull its ears.
Yeah, you're just being a jerk.
Yes.
You're not a heroic person. You're just a jerk.
You're just a jerk.
And that's the tragedy of those things, but they definitely have to be worked through. It does happen. It definitely does happen.
A very, very, very small percentage, though, I would say.
And the other piece is watch for table and house rules. I know in our house, whether it's role-playing or whether it's we're playing Cards Against Humanity or anything like that, we have our own trigger rules that we have, and our group is very aware that when those games come out, a lot of them will literally just pull a section out of their box and set it to the side, and we do that with our characters as well and our stories. And if we go to dip into something that could be triggery, we're being considerate of saying, hey, this is where the story might go. Is everybody okay with that?
And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it is that makes you uncomfortable. No. It doesn't, and you don't owe that explanation to anybody. But if it's making you uncomfortable and the room isn't picking up on it, do say something.
Exactly. Exactly.
A lot of the time, and that's the other thing. People get so caught up in it, and that's half the fun of role playing. Oh my gosh, we're just running roughshod over all of this, and it's wonderful. And you can lose track of your other players.
Yeah, and Knox brings up or harass the women at the table. Like, I have a problem with that as a whole. Because that's just a terrible thing to do as a person regardless. I think if you've got people who are harassing other players of the game, I don't care who they are, that person doesn't fit at that table.
Yeah.
That's not comfortable.
Yeah. I may be a male tiefling, but at the table, I'm a human, and I have human feelings, and I have human considerations, and there is a line. There is definitely a line there, and it's just because on paper, I'm the dwarf that throws axes, does not mean real life me.
Yeah, and I think there are some social things that games attempt that definitely are stigma related. The amorous bard who's always hitting on everyone, or the aristocrat who considers anyone who's not his race to be beneath him.
Yes.
I think there are definitely ways to play those characters, but that isn't your one thing.
No.
That can never be a one thing at a comfortable, respectable table.
Because that's back to Mary Sue territory of that's all that person is.
Yeah.
That's everything about their character in one line, and it's never going to go beyond that. And that's just boring. It's boring to play. It's boring to storytell around.
Yeah. I mean, in Overwatch brings point, unless it's a special kind of get-together, that's a different thing.
Sure.
If you're creating a game that is meant to grind in a certain direction and everyone is agreed that that's the direction it's going to go and it's that comfort level, then that's okay. But it takes time to get your group to that point, and I would never step into a group with those kind of feelings.
Oh no.
So it's always should be inclusive.
You've got the cabbage seller in Airbender.
Yeah.
Who's it's funny that his stuff keeps getting destroyed because it's played funny.
Correct.
But in real life, we'd feel badly for him. We'll go pay you for your cabbages.
And you never know when something is going to change the way you feel about it. And you have the right at any time to basically be like, I'm no longer comfortable with this.
Yes, absolutely.
That is perfectly okay. There are all numbers of reasons of why you could be uncomfortable with anything. Of things in a game. And it is perfectly okay to step up to your group and be like, I am no longer comfortable with this. And you should be supportive of those people and say, okay.
Well, and the X card for all your readers, have you talked to your...
We've definitely talked about it on the show a few times. We always bring it back up. The X card is a great way
I just wanted to make sure everybody had the base for that.
No. Everybody, whenever there's a problem, if you haven't heard our previous shows, the X card was a concept that was brought up, I believe, through Powered by the Apocalypse, and it was the idea that if something gets said, or an action, or within a scene that is uncomfortable, this card can be laid down or a mark can be put down so that without question that basically says that this is uncomfortable. At that point, everyone pauses and steps away. Effectively in game. Yeah. And the scene moves on in a totally different direction. Maybe you just move to the next scene. The idea being that there is no need to question why that person is uncomfortable. They don't have to defend themselves. There is nothing that needs to be said further on that. They can literally just step away from it and move on, and everybody can continue enjoying it. Because then everyone gets back to the enjoyment. It is not the enjoyment of one, it is back to the enjoyment of all.
Yep.
So that's what that X card really represents. Yeah. If you're not familiar with it, I highly recommend adding it to any game that you're playing. This includes tabletop games. So... Now, we have some questions, and we are down to 7 minutes. So I would like to get those. You want to hit one of these? Are you struggling on trying to pull them up?
Yes.
That is fine. I will hit a question.
Technology is failing the Luddite.
That is perfectly all right. I'll start with Nox's. So what piece of advice would you wish someone would have told you in the beginning of your tabletop experience? And is there anyone that you wish they hadn't?
Oh, it's such a good question. I'd actually thought about this, a little bit, and I wish that people had told me that it was okay to take those risks, that it was okay to be a completely different character. When I was first drawing it up, it's like it's you, but just picture yourself in a fantasy costume. Mm-hmm. I'm like, but what if I don't want to be me? Mm-hmm. They're like, no. This is how the game works. Well, maybe that's how some games work, but. Mm-hmm. But and it's again, this is decades ago, and things have gotten so much better. And again, like we were talking about, I really wish that starting out somebody had said, your character is not your stats, but your stats can inform your character. Let them work together.
I think that's a great point. I would have loved to have heard that when I was earlier. If that. Just because you have bad stats doesn't mean you have a bad character. Because when I first started playing, it was all about numbers and being absolutely the best you could possibly be, instead of letting your your failed stats help make a better story.
Yes.
I think one of the worst things that I had learned, and I kind of wish it didn't happen that way as early as it did, was the concept of min-maxing.
Oh,
I think that actually pushed me further away from role-playing initially and storytelling as a whole. So I don't like the idea of min-maxing as a whole now so much. I'd rather have a story and just a character that I'm interested in and that other people are interested in.
Yep.
There's a place for it. I think there's definitely an edge for it, and I do not discount anybody who does it. But I kind of lean into the flaws a little bit more.
Yeah.
So,
as Sarah pointed out, even a good story starts with a failure. Mm-hmm. A dragon has stolen the princess. Oh, we have multiple points of failure there.
Yeah.
If everything was going right, the dragon would not have stolen the princess.
Yes.
So failure is so important. Overwatch, you'd asked, role-playing can be completely alien to someone with zero exposure to it beforehand. What is one facet of tabletop role-playing that is hard for brand new people to get? What's the best way to help them get it? And I think again, that comes to rolling. When do I roll? How do I roll? Well, that's sort of informed again by the story. You get to, okay, we're on our way to the castle. Well, once you get to the castle, start thinking ahead a little bit. What's going to happen there? What am I meant to do there? Well, if I'm supposed to jump over the wall, and you can absolutely ask your group, what kind of skills do I need to try and jump over the wall? And then you're going to pull those dice out and make that roll.
Some of it, I think, also comes with, I think in your direction as well, is what is your approach?
Yes.
And that approach comes to both the tactical aspects of physically doing something as your character in there, as well as how you're going to approach a scene.
Yes.
And what your approach to someone is. I think one of the best things that can be alien is stepping away from doing my character is doing this to
I as my character.
It's the there's a locked chest before you. Okay. I'll ask Zarya to help me unlock the chest because she's a rogue. To instead say, Zarya, this seems to be causing me to be all thumbs. Do you think you could work your clicky magic here? And now you're the character.
Yes.
You just stepped into your character, and that's different, and now that person's going to respond differently to you.
Yes.
And you've changed the approach there. So I think that's one of the things and so one of the best ways to get into role-playing is to stop saying what your character is going to do
and just or narrate it.
Narrate it as best you can in a first-person method.
Yes. That helps you inhabit the character much, much better.
Yeah, I would definitely agree on that one. We also have one here from the Mad Elf. Under what circumstances would you want to provide some role-playing coaching to players?
Ooh.
That is interesting. And I was thinking about this when we first got the question. I was just like, okay, so what circumstances could come about that they might need coaching? Or what circumstances would I want to provide coaching to a player? And I thought about that. I was like, so are you asking if I want to run something at the library on how to role play? Or are you asking, I have players at my table that have clear role-playing problems and maybe there needs to be a coaching session there? So it's interesting. I would say coaching would probably come in when the gameplay gets troublesome. When the mechanics of the game are going fine, but players are clearly not enjoying themselves and are binding against each other.
Yes.
With what they're doing with their characters. Your character is a lone wolf who's always a lone wolf, and anytime, you guys get into a combat scene or a decision starts to get making, this character literally walks away. I would say that. So yeah, I would probably lean to when there's a problem. Unfortunately, that's our time for today. Our next week's topic is System Spotlight for the Traveler game. You can find us on Twitter at @ST_Conclave, on Instagram at @ST_Conclave, on Mixlr on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m., which you might be listening right now, at mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave. Or on Discord, you can find a link on our Twitter or on our website at storytellerconclave.com. We'd also like to thank our Patreon members, especially our name members, Knox in the Box, Sam, the Arcane Asylum, Sparkle Motion Veteran, and Hulavu. We really appreciate everything you do and how much you support us in this. Our pre-show music, if you got a chance to listen to it, is by Arcane Anthems. You can find that at patreon.com/arcaneanthems. Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Guy Frog. Apparently our links are not great, but I believe you can still find them on the web. Whether or not, we'll add some new links there for that. And our outro music is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Binaire Machine. I still think you can find that at freemusicarchive.org. We'd like to thank our families, Vicky, Sean, Sarah, I know you're out there, for supporting us. I'd personally like to thank Kathrine for joining me on this co-hosting, and all of our friends who've played games with us over the years. And to you, our listeners.
Thank you so much for letting me in on this.
You're
and
very
Sarah,
welcome.
Sarah, get better. We love you.
All right. Good night, everybody.